So I learned a really fascinating statistic this last week that's a little bit troubling when I think about it long enough. It's this, that did you know 75% of all social media users use it to get advice? We need some better advice on where to get our advice, I think. Well, we all do it, right? We jump on social media, whether it's Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or Pinterest or any of the others, because somewhere on there we're going to find some financial advice. How we should budget, how we should spend, how we should invest. Sometimes we're going on there to get advice on our family, how to be a better parent, how to be a better spouse. Where should we take our kids on vacation? What is going to help them learn and become the best kind of human, right? Sometimes we go on there and we get political advice, which is maybe the worst place to get that kind of advice on who we should vote for and who's right and who's wrong. We certainly go on there to get physical advice. How can we get in shape? What's the best diet? What's the best workout? On and on and on the list goes. We even go onto these social media apps to get advice about where to be entertained, which is strange that we're getting on an application designed to entertain us, hoping it will tell us where to be entertained. We are strange people. But it's full of it. I mean, everywhere you go, you don't have to look hard. You will find somebody telling you what you ought to do with your life and how you ought to live your life. My problem is they don't practice it. My guess is as soon as the camera turns off on their phone, they are just as broke and bored as I am. But they can put on a good show, and they can give a good talk, and they can be really convincing, and they can get me to believe that they're right. But if I followed them around for long enough, I'd realize they are not practicing what they preach either. Even worse is that their advice doesn't work. There's a reason there's so many people still giving advice on how to lose weight, because nobody's losing weight the way anybody before them taught us to. There's a reason that we're all still looking for somebody to tell us how to keep our kids out of the counselor's office when they're adults, because we don't want to screw them up, because nobody cracked the code. There's a reason I still am watching videos on the best vacuum cleaner to make cleaning the most fun. Why is my TikTok so full of vacuum videos? I don't know, but it really, truly is. So they're not doing it, and what they're telling me I should do is not that great, which helps me understand something about all of that advice. In fact, this might be true of a lot of the advice in your life. There's a whole lot of should, but not would. Like, you should do this, but I wouldn't. You should go there, but I wouldn't. You should say this, but I wouldn't do that. It reminds me a lot of when I was young, and maybe you had the same experience, and I encountered an electric fence for the first time. If you were with your friends, here's what they said: you should touch that. And I'm like, I'm not touching it, you should touch it. And you know what they said? I would never touch that. Why is all the big advice, why is all the shoulds custom fit for just me and nobody else? You should touch the fence, you should eat the hot pepper, you should ask them out over and over again. That's what we hear. But if we turn the tables, that same person will go, but I'm not doing that. That's just not for me. There's these big promises about what could be true for you if you do, and all the good laughs and the great video it'll make and all of that kind of stuff. But it's hollow because they would never do it if they were in your shoes. Which just helps us see this undeniable fact that advice is cheap. There's a reason we say, I'll give you a nickel's worth of free advice. Because it's not worth much. There's so much of it. We are so inundated with it all of the time. There's just nothing to it. It's like when you buy a car that you would say, it was a cheap car. It looked really good on the lot. All of the features on the sticker sounded really amazing, but it broke down a lot. It did not live up to the hype. Or if you buy a cheap kitchen appliance, it looked really good in Best Buy, and the guy selling it to me told me it would change my life, and then I plugged it in and it blew up and it made my life worse, right? Like, it was cheap. The price was right, but the product itself did not come through. And that's how it feels when people come into our lives, whether they're friends or just acquaintances, and they're saying, you should do this, and you should do that, and you should go there. It just feels really cheap. And the reason I want to talk about that is because it's that principle that I think, for so many people, has made or rendered religion trivial. Because let's be honest, and some of you are not going to like this, but religion, or Christianity in our case, is spiritual advice. It's like how to live a better life. We literally say that. And Jesus said things like, if you follow me, then you'll live life to the fullest. And so we sometimes reduce Jesus to this great advice giver, because he said a lot of shoulds. You should do this, you should do this, you should do this. And if you do, everything will be great. And preachers like me stand up here and we give recipes for steps 1 through 3, or do A through C, and then life will be awesome and God will bless you. And you do those things and you're like, your advice was garbage, because it didn't actually change anything. If we're being really honest, for so many people, in fact, for some of you in this room, religion and this church thing is just spiritualized advice. Even if you look at Jesus' life, some would argue all it got him was an execution on a Roman cross. All it got him was defeat. It didn't actually add up to anything. Except for one thing. Unless one thing is true, then you're right. And so I understand. I understand if you're here today and you have not bought into this, or you're skeptical of this. I totally get it, and I'm with you, and I agree with a lot of the things that you would say make this difficult. And it would be easy for me, too, to go, Jesus was just a really great philosopher or a really great teacher that gave, really great advice on how to live a better life. But there's a moment that takes it to the next level for me. And that moment is when he walks out of the tomb. It's been 3 weeks since we celebrated Easter, and we say every year at that time, Jesus was killed on a cross, but that's not the end of the story. He was buried, and then he came back to life 3 days later. And then on Monday, we go back to living life like that didn't happen, if we're being honest. And what we're trying to explore in this series, and what I want to wrestle with today, is if that Sunday was true, what does it mean for Monday? And to me, if Jesus came out of the tomb, then his advice was not cheap. His advice becomes authority. Because if you have authority over life and death, you have authority over everything. That's the one thing you and I can't beat. That's the one thing you and I cannot prevent, is death. But Jesus seemed to master that. And I say this all the time. Sorry, I'm saying it again. If you can predict your own death and resurrection and then pull it off to the letter, I go with whatever you say. I do not look at what you taught as advice that might be helpful in my life. I look at it as you're God himself, and you have authority in my life because you have authority over death. Another way to put this is an empty tomb proves that Jesus' words are not. An empty tomb proves that Jesus' words are not empty. What he said has validity. What he said has real weight and real meat to it. And we're going to talk about what that means, what that looks like, what that is. What is it that he taught us? If it's not just, here's 5 easy steps to a little bit better life, what is it actually? The good news for you and me is we're not the first people to wrestle with this. People have been wrestling with this for millennia. In fact, they started wrestling with it just days after Jesus was killed and then supposedly came back to life. And what's really important as we look at what we're going to look at today, the people involved that are having a conversation with Peter believe Jesus is still dead. They assume that he is still dead. They understand his body's not in the tomb, but they assume that it got taken and hidden somewhere else, and he is surely dead because they watched him take his last breath. Now, the people that Peter is talking to are the religious elite of the day. They're the religious leaders, sometimes called Pharisees. Another group of them is called the Sadducees. And they have Peter and the boys on trial. And the reason they're on trial is because a few days before, they had been on trial for telling everybody that Jesus was God. They were going around saying Jesus did die, but he did come back from the dead. We did see him with our own eyes. And he's the king, he's God himself, and you should not just listen to him, you should build your life on him. Well, the religious people of the day did not like that idea, because that was different than what they taught. So they pulled Peter and the guys in, they said, don't you talk about him anymore. We got rid of him, we want to get rid of this outbreak of like cult, sidestepping the religion thing, and just be quiet. And to help you understand how serious we are, we're going to put you in jail. So they put Peter and these guys in jail, and miraculously in the middle of the night, they are freed, and they get out in the open, and you would think they'd go, okay, we're just going to keep quiet, but they don't. They go right back to what they were doing, telling everybody about Jesus, telling everybody that he was exactly who he says he was. The history is headed in a direction because God had intervened in history. And so they arrest Peter and those guys again, and they have them back on trial. And that's where we're going to jump in. It's recorded in the book of Acts, which Luke wrote, a physician in the first century, interviewed all of the people that were around Jesus and witnessed this firsthand. And now he's kind of running with those same guys. And so he's watching this trial take place, and it is amazing what Peter does. We gave you strict orders never again to teach in this man's name, Jesus' name, the high priest said. Instead, you filled all Jerusalem with your teaching about him, and you want to make us responsible for his death. Clutch your pearls. But Peter and the apostles replied, we must obey, get the word he uses, God. We must obey God rather than any human authority. So when he's talking about Jesus, when the high priest is talking about Jesus, Peter quickly turns this into a discussion not about just Jesus, but about God himself and about authority, who's in charge. And because Jesus, in Peter's view, is God, and God said, go into all the world and teach them about me and teach them what I taught you, he took that seriously because God himself told him. Now, what comes out of his mouth next is stunning. The God of our ancestors raised Jesus from the dead after you killed him by hanging him on a cross. Then God put him in the place of honor at his right hand as Prince and Savior. He did this so the people of Israel would repent of their sins and be forgiven. How bold is Peter? This is the same Peter, by the way, that acted like he didn't even know Jesus about a week ago. And now he's standing in front of the most powerful people in the known world. They could put an end to his life like that. And he looks them in the eye and he says, you killed him. It's your fault. You're the ones that trumped up all these charges against him and executed him and turned him over to the Romans. But here's what's so cool about what Peter's saying. He starts with the authority of God himself. And the reason Jesus has authority is not because he was convincing, not because he gave good advice and it proved to be true, not because he was a rabbi or a local that rose to power. It was because he came back from the dead. The center of what Peter is saying is he was resurrected. Peter's faith is not built on the Bible tells me so, because the Bible did not exist at this moment. Peter's faith is not based on a good preacher's message that convinced him to believe something that was hard to believe. Peter's faith and his boldness is based on an event. Jesus walked out of the tomb, and that gives him real authority. And I will do what he's told me to do because of it. You see, what Peter understands is kings and people with real, true authority, kingly authority. They don't give out advice. They give out orders. A king doesn't say, hey, I got an idea for how you should do your day. He says, this is how you're going to do your day. knows what's best for you. And he knows how he wants his kingdom to function. So he gives orders accordingly. Now the good news is Jesus is not this bossy tyrant of a king. He's a servant king. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. But I don't want you to miss this. The catalyst, the jet fuel, the foundation for what Peter is saying, the reason he stands, full-chested in front of these people saying what he's saying is because of the resurrection. It's not because Jesus wrote a great book or had an awesome podcast or did a call-in show on the radio and proved it. He proved it because he came back from the dead. He said he was going to die. He said he'd come back 3 days later, and then he did. So we're going to go with whatever he says. That's the essence of Peter's argument. That's the essence of the gospel, is the resurrection, the empty tomb. You might be surprised to hear that the people he just said all this to did not like it. Like at all. And this is how they respond. When they heard this, the high council was furious and decided to kill them. So they were going to be executed. But one member, a Pharisee named Gamaliel, now this guy is fascinating because he gets one quick mention here and then one other mention a little bit later in Luke's account. And the reason he's so interesting is not just because of what he's going to say here, but he is the Pharisee that trained and mentored another Pharisee named Saul, who would eventually become Paul and write most of the New Testament. So this is before Saul would become Paul, but Gamaliel plays this kind of critical part in the story of the church getting started. And what he's about to say is so amazing. And it's not anything we usually spend a whole lot of time talking about, but his words are so profound. He was an expert in religious law and respected by all the people. So all the religious people and all the people that were religious stood up and ordered that the men, or Peter and the guys, be sent outside the council chamber for a while. Then he said to his colleagues, men of Israel, take care what you are planning to do to these men. Some time ago, there was that fellow, Theodos, who pretended to be someone great. Kind of like Jesus pretended, in his mind, pretended to be someone great. About 400 others joined him, but he was killed. And all his followers went their various ways. They just spread out. The whole movement came to nothing. After him, at the time of the census, there was Judas of Galilee. He got people to follow him, but he was killed too, and all his followers scattered. So, my advice is, leave these men alone. Let them go. If they're planning and doing these things merely on their own, it will soon be overthrown. This is amazing what he's just laid out. For one, he brings up two real historical figures that fell into kind of the same bracket as Jesus. Radical teachers, got a bunch of people to listen to him and follow him around, and got the religious, kind of tradition riled up because they were kind of heading people in different directions, and they had this big following, and it got everybody unnerved and unsettled. But there was a problem. There was a barrier that they came up against, and that was their death. And when they died, the movement died with them. Everybody stopped. They no longer believed what they were saying. They no longer heeded their advice or adopted their teaching. That was it. It was over when they died. So Gamaliel is essentially saying, let the body get cold, and the movement will too. Don't risk the political fallout of executing Peter and these guys. Just let it go, because Jesus, we can assume, is still dead, which means the movement will be dead soon too. Gamaliel's whole argument is based on whether or not Jesus is alive. If he's dead, we have nothing to worry about, because we've seen this before. This has happened before. And when the leader dies, the following goes too. And Pharisees understood this well, because Gamaliel was trained by an older Pharisee who had a big following and was really important and really influential. But eventually that Pharisee died. And another Pharisee stepped in and taught something a little bit different, and people started following him. Pharisees understood, as you and I do, that all followings are temporary. Followings are always temporary. If this would be a fun little exercise for you. Go back in your Instagram, if you have it, or Facebook, or TikTok, and go back to who the people were that you first started following. Odds are it was probably during COVID, because we were all bored to tears. We needed something to do. So we got on social media and we started following these people, and they were giving you advice on like what to do with your kids when you're locked in the house all day, and how to wipe down your groceries and leave them in the garage. It was a crazy time. My guess is you've not heard from them in a while. Their following of 1 million people kind of fell off, and nobody's paying attention to them anymore. And we found other people to follow, and that's kind of what Gamaliel's getting at. Just give it time. The leader's gone. He's not going to be producing content anymore, so no one will be following him anymore. I think of it like this. Now, some of you will really be able to identify with me if you grew up in the 80s and 90s. Because we had to go to health class in the 80s and 90s. And one of the things that they pushed on us over and over again in health class was the food pyramid. Do you remember this, baby? Now, I thought this thing was amazing, and here's why. The bigger the section on the pyramid, the more of that food you should eat. You should eat tons of it if it's the biggest one. Do you know what the biggest section was, the one on the bottom? Grains and cereals. This is what we call the good old days. They literally stood in front of us and said, you should eat Sara Lee and Cap'n Crunch. And I thought, this is amazing. This is the best class I've ever taken in my life. And so we did. Everything was on bread. Do you remember when you used to have bread with every meal? Because they told you 7 to 8 or 8 to 12 servings of grains and cereals. They told you to eat gluten. But what happened? The people that designed it moved on to other things. The people that designed it and came up with the idea got old. And we started listening to other people. And I know we learned some things, some good things. I get all that. But the new people turned the pyramid upside down. And now they tell you shouldn't eat any of that stuff, that it's like from the pit of hell. And all you should eat now is protein. Protein, protein. Have you walked through the grocery store lately? There's protein powder, protein bars, there's protein bread, which how does that work? There's protein water, there's protein candy. I don't understand how they're putting protein in everything, but they are, and now they're saying this is what you should eat more than anything else in the world. Expert advice always changes. Remember yesterday when chocolate was bad for you? Today it's not. It's good for you. And coffee and wine drinkers, one day they're going to tell you you shouldn't touch that stuff, and then a week later they're going to tell you you should, because the people in power shift and they change. And when the people teaching the class, when the people running the division of the government move on, someone else steps in and it's a whole new ball game. I'm waiting for the day when gluten is a health food again. It's my favorite food group. It's going to happen. So Gamaliel's argument is if you don't like it, wait. It'll change. But that's not the last thing Gamaliel said. He has one more sentence. And it's the other side of the coin. But if it's from God, if what Peter is saying is true, you won't be able to overthrow them. You may even find yourselves fighting against God himself. Peter rests the entire argument on the resurrection. Gamaliel rests his entire argument on the resurrection. If Jesus is still dead, we don't have anything to worry about because the movement will die too. But if he's not, buckle up because everything's on the table. It is game on if Jesus is still alive. Gamaliel understands, and I think we should understand, that if Jesus did come back from the dead, then he gave more than good advice. And he was more than a good teacher, and he was more than a philosopher. He was more than a rabbi. He's a king. He is the king. And what he was teaching us was the culture of his kingdom. This is how it works when I'm in charge. This is how we interact with each other when I'm in charge. This is how you live the life that you were made for. Not just a better life, but the life. This is how you were made to be in relationship. This is how you were made to sacrifice for each other and serve each other. It was more than good advice. It was a description of his kingdom. And that is an amazing kingdom. Here's what it means practically for you and me today, and what it meant for Gamaliel and Peter and all of those folks in the room that day. When Jesus said something crazy like, love your enemies, that wasn't like good advice to make your neighborhood better. That wasn't like good advice so that you can get along with your coworkers. This is who you're supposed to be. You don't just love people that love you back. You don't just love people that are lovable. You don't just love people that agree with you. You love people that are on the opposite side than you. And you love them so much that you start to wonder why you keep calling them your enemy. Because you can't love an enemy like you love them. That's not good advice. That's the core of who we're supposed to be. Because it's the core of who Jesus is. And when Jesus said things like you should forgive unconditionally, it wasn't like, here's one simple tip for a healthy marriage. It was, this is who you're supposed to be every single day. Not just on Sunday, but on Monday too. And that's what the resurrection gives us. If Sunday was true, then it means a whole lot for our Monday. When your neighbor ticks you off for the 100th time, when your kid disappoints you for the 50th time, when you get cut off in traffic for the 10th time, you forgive without condition. Before they say they're sorry, before they say they understand why they're sorry, you forgive. Not a good tip. An edict from the King of Kings. So when Jesus said things like, don't cheat on your spouse, it wasn't keeping up with all of the other people, because this is what's interesting. If you go to your office tomorrow, or you go to your school tomorrow, or your PTA meeting, and you just do a quick poll. Hey, I'm doing a quick poll. Do you think it's okay to cheat on your spouse? Everybody and their brother is going to say, no, that's not okay. So Jesus wasn't just saying that because that's what everybody else said. He was saying it because this is what's going to be true. Or he would say things like, don't love money. Like, you shouldn't love money. It's okay to have money. In fact, you can have a lot of money. But you can't love it more than you love your neighbor. And you can't love it more than you love God. In fact, you may end up seeing it as a means by which you can love them well. And he would say, you don't judge others. Not because he was like, hey, let's all join hands and sing Kumbaya, and we don't want to offend anybody. Like, that's how we always misunderstand this. Like, Jesus was saying, oh, you just don't offend anybody. No, Jesus was serious about this. It's don't judge other people, because you're going to be judged the way that you judge them. And for me, I want a whole lot of grace. Like a whole bucket full of grace. So that's what I want to give everybody else. So Jesus was not laying out a recipe for a better life. He was describing the culture of the kingdom and what our life is in it. So here's what I think you and I should do. Something that I'm trying I'm not always doing very well, but it's helping some. I think you should take the word should out of your vocabulary when it comes to what Jesus taught. Listen to the difference. Jesus said, I should love my enemies, versus Jesus said, love my enemies. There's a difference, right? As soon as I put the word should in, what does it sound like? Good advice. Optional. Yeah, if it works for you. The second I put should in, Jesus said I should forgive unconditionally, but sometimes it's really hard to forgive unconditionally, so I know what he said I should do, but it's not something I would do. But if I take it out, now it sounds different. It feels different. Jesus said I shouldn't judge my enemies, but they are pretty awful. And Jesus, he's gracious and he'll forgive and all of that. Jesus goes, wait a minute, no. If you are a citizen of the kingdom, then this is who you are. It's not just something you should do. See, an empty tomb proves that Jesus' words weren't. They weren't empty either. And this is not a message of like, so you better be afraid, or you should be scared. It's truly like, if you have ever wrestled with why should I listen to Jesus? Why should I change my life or reorder my life or treat people different, love people more than myself? Why should I do that? This is why. The tomb's not empty. And the whole thing would have fallen apart if it weren't. But it's empty. And so Jesus has authority, and he knows what's best. It's not a suggestion about what's best. And just imagine for a minute, if we really, really started thinking this way, if we started pulling should out of it, and we stopped seeing Jesus as like a great advice giver, and more like the king of our lives, and us as citizens in the kingdom, what would it mean for your marriage? Like if it was no longer I should forgive them, and more I do forgive them, because that's who I am, because that's who Jesus is. What would that do? You might have a little less bitterness, you might have a little less resentment. Not saying perfect, but different. Maybe more patience, more kindness. The problem is we entertain a lot of what Jesus said as good advice instead of enacting what Jesus said as kind of the blueprint for how we should be as people. Think about what it would do at work, like in your cubicle. If you really didn't judge your neighbor, if you really did love them without condition, you might actually not hate Monday so much. You might actually go, I kind of enjoy being there. Again, I'm not saying do this and that life will be perfect, but it might be different. You might be different. You might have a little kingdom in your cubicle. We might get to experience heaven on earth, and that's what Jesus taught us to pray. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I don't think he was playing around with that. I think if we got this, if we started living every day like it's Easter, and I know that sounds like Buddy the Elf with Christmas, but like live every day as if it was Easter Sunday, then we could bring Sunday to Monday, and Monday would feel a little bit different. And suddenly, we're not just trying to like keep up with the hundreds of inputs we get every day about what we should do. It starts to become who we are. That's the difference. That's the difference in Monday as a result of Sunday. So the reason we keep saying at the beginning of each of these messages, whether it's Carson where he's talking about Jesus is who he says he is, if Sunday's real, and Rex was saying that history's heading somewhere. If God intervened in the way he did, then And I'm saying it's more than good advice. The invitation really is come and see. If Jesus is not dead, then come and see what that life looks like. Because it's different. And I believe it's better. I believe it's worth it. And it's what we're going to talk about next week is that my hope in all that is not foolishness. Because my hope and my faith is built on an event that there were eyewitnesses to. And that changed the game entirely. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you for thanks for not staying dead. That sounds really silly to say to you, but we would have no hope, and we would know no different if you hadn't come back from the dead. And we would have chalked everything you taught and everything you said and everything you did up to just some good advice, and we can get that anywhere. But you brought an authority to it by having authority over the one thing that is undefeated in our world. And so help us this week to take the should out of all the things that we know you taught us and to just see them as this is my king who loves me and who loves this world, showing me what the kingdom looks like. And then help us to enact it ourselves. In Jesus' name, amen.